Diplomatic ties between India and Canada are rapidly deteriorating, with Canadian police announcing they've discovered Indian government agents involved in serious criminal activity on their soil. India and Canada have both expelled 6 of the other's diplomats from their countries, as tensions over the murder of a Sikh separatist in Canada last year intensify. Veena Najbulla is the Vice President of Research and Strategy at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, and she joins us now from Vancouver. Veena, thank you. We know relations between the countries haven't been great, but tell us more about what is behind this latest move.
Absolutely. Today's events are just unprecedented. This is really an astonishing set of activities that have happened throughout the day. We've seen the expulsion of diplomats, but we've also heard RCMP, as well as Prime Minister of Canada, note in no uncertain terms that Canada believes Indian diplomats have been engaged in criminal activities, acts of violence here on Canadian soil, that because of public safety issues, they had to come out and make publicly these statements that have led to this enormous disruption in the bilateral relationship.
And can you briefly give us some more context here about what happened last year and what is the pro-Khalistan movement?
Absolutely. So last year, Prime Minister Trudeau, after returning from G20 and his meetings with Prime Minister Modi, stood in Parliament and essentially said Canada has credible, has evidence or believes that India has been involved in the assassination of a Canadian here on Canadian soil. That, of course, led to a diplomatic crisis at the time. India denied all allegations. Subsequently, we saw stories emerging out of the U.S. of a similar plot that actually did not result in a killing because the U.S. was able to disrupt it. But nonetheless, there were lots of developments happening between U.S. and India on the same issue. Again, India has been accused of targeting Sikh separatists, Khalistani separatists on Canadian soil, on U.S. soil, as well as in Australia and the U.K. as well. So this is a long-standing issue. In the case of Canada, we had an actual murder. A Canadian died here in British Columbia, where I am right now. And Canadian government has been engaging over the last year with the Indian government in diplomacy. We've had exchanges, including at the most senior level, of course, the Prime Minister himself, but also National Security Advisor, as recently as this weekend. So the Prime Minister revealed that over the weekend in Singapore, you had meetings between Canadian national security officials and the National Security Advisor of India, Mr. Doval, and that those meetings did not go well. India refused to cooperate, refused to waive diplomatic immunity when it came to the 6 diplomats that have now been expelled. And as a result, Canada had to issue a notice saying that they will take this action of expelling them. India preemptively recalled those diplomats and then subsequently expelled Canadian diplomats as well. So we essentially now have an open diplomatic disruption and this crisis that's now unfolding as we speak.
And Veena, as you correctly described there, Canada's PM Justin Trudeau was very firm last year when he publicly accused India's government of involvement in the killing of a Canadian citizen on home soil.
Yes.
How would you describe his actions and words in this latest instalment?
Yes, I mean, he gave a very long press briefing, and you could see that the Prime Minister has been engaging on this issue, including as recently as last week on the margins of the ASEAN summit in Laos. He spoke directly, albeit briefly, with Prime Minister Modi about this issue. And you could also see that Prime Minister Trudeau said Canada doesn't want this fight with India. We have had good diplomatic relations for 75 years. India is a strategic partner. India is valuable to Canada, US, and others when it comes to our engagement in the Indo-Pacific, not to mention the important bilateral relationship. So Canada doesn't want to find itself in this situation, and yet here we are, because every effort to engage privately to seek cooperation have gone unanswered. And in fact, it was India that leaked the information about the expulsion of diplomats and took preemptive actions. And so the whole thing has become public, which has led then Canada to issue the kind of statements that we've seen today, which again are extraordinary. This is uncharted waters when it comes to diplomatic engagement between Canada and India. We will see what happens next. And of course, Canada is also engaging with partners, including Australia, allies and partners, Five Eyes, as well as G7 partners, to make sure that they're fully briefed and understand why Canada had to take this step.
Veena, India's government has been scathing, but in your country, I mean, they believe there is a threat to public safety.
Yeah, so that is exactly what we heard today, both from the Prime Minister, but also from the head of the police here in Canada, saying that since last year, since these allegations first became public, what has actually happened is that the violence has increased. And that is actually one of the most starking revelations today that has come out. And our Minister of Foreign Affairs has also said that in fact, there have been more cases of intimidation, more case of harassment and other crimes here in Canada since the revelation went public last year. And that Canada has credible evidence that the sitting diplomats were engaged in those activities. And that in order to disrupt that network, that nexus of diplomats and criminal actors, they had to take this extraordinary step of expelling diplomats, which has then, of course, led to this crisis in the relationship.